Thanks for joining me today as we look at how to do some more pattern drafting with our collars. In today's episode, we're going to look at how to create a pussy bow blouse collar. And this is a really nice, elegant detail. As you can see in the image next to me, there is a very nice, delicate little bow at the top of the neckline. The centre front, we've got a little opening at the front there, and that just allows our head to pop through the garment nice and easily. And then you can tie the bow lower down or higher up if you want a more structured look. Now, I would recommend for your final version of this that you use a fabric with a lot of drape. So a very drapey tencel or lawn cotton, something very fine and drapey. And the reason for that is because we just want the bow to sit really elegantly. In our video, we're going to be using our standard pattern drafting tools and our standard calico fabric, just so we can really see the impact of the structure in comparison to everything else that we've done so far. But as I said, use a drapey fabric for your final version. Okay, so we're going to make quite a few changes to our standard block here today, and the reason is that we've got quite a lot of different construction happening at the front, but also what we don't want to do is we don't want to create another opening. We want to have a completely whole back, so we want to cut the pattern piece on the fold there, and we literally just want to be able to pull the top over our head and be done with it. So rather than focusing on creating a fit that is really fitted to our body, we're actually going to do more of a relaxed fit today. So I'll show you how to do that. We're going to be moving a dart and then altering our waist darts and actually removing them completely. So let's take a look at how to do that together today. Now, the first thing I want to do is just move the dart from the neckline, because we're going to be making some changes to the neckline as we move on. So I'm actually just going to draw a line, let's say 3 centimeters from the shoulder point. I'm going to draw that line straight to the apex. Next, we're going to cut along that line and then remove the volume by cutting out the existing dart at the neck point. Remove that volume completely and close up that dart pivoting at the apex. Next thing I'm going to do is just to add a little piece of paper underneath my traced over block. And very simply, all I'm going to do is draw a line from the apex straight down, all the way down, on both the front and the back pattern piece. This effectively is going to give us the extra volume that we need. Fantastic. Now that we've adjusted our block, so we've got the basics of the block ready to go, we're now going to take a look at the neckline construction. To start off with, mark a point along the shoulder seam from the neck point down the shoulder about 5 centimeters. And then continue just to draw a nice curve that is 5 centimeters offset all the way around the neckline. Next, I'm just going to mark where the apex sits along the center front line, and then I'm just going to mark a point that is 3 centimeters above that point. Next, along our new neckline point, mark a point that is 2 centimeters away from the center point along that line and join up with a little V your new neckline. Great, so that's the front bodice neckline sorted. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes, cut it out and sort it out, but we're just going to move on to the back pattern piece now. Now on the back, we need to reduce the width of the shoulder seam by the same amount that we reduced it for the front, obviously because this bit needs to attach onto that bit. So the first thing to do is to just mark a point 5 centimeters along from the shoulder seam. That's perfect. Now at the back, we don't want to drop the neckline too far, otherwise it's going to end up like sitting really far down our back. So as we get to the center back seam, we're just going to reduce the neckline depth by just a few centimeters. Along the centre back, mark a point that is 3 centimeters along, and then basically just find a nice curve to join those two up. Okay, so move the neckline 5 centimeters there and 5 centimeters there. Brilliant, that's all going to match up now. Okay, we're going to cut out our bodice now along the bits that we are not going to be using. So cut along your red lines here, and then cut along the neckline. Now we've done all the prep we need to do to our back and our front, so let's move on to our collar. Grab a tape measure and then let's just measure the length of our new back neckline. Again, we're working in centimetres here, aren't we, as normal? So grab your tape measure and just work it along the neckline, and then make a note of the length of your new neckline. Likewise, make a note of this length along here, just the curved part of your neckline. Okay, so our collar needs to be the length of this plus the length of this, and then we need to add like a length of tie so that we can tie it together at the front. So grab your calculator and then tap in the length of your neckline at the back, add it to the length of your neckline along the front, and then add 50 centimeters to that length. Okay, so whatever you've got on your calculator now, for me it's 78.5, you want to then create a nice big long rectangle that is 78.5 long by 5 centimeters tall. This is going to be your centre back. Working from the centre back, which is the centre back here on the pattern piece here, I want you just to mark a point where the shoulder seam is. So for me, it will be 12 centimetres along this line. And then I want you to mark the next point from the shoulder seam to the point there, which for me is 16.5. For you, it'll be something different, and that's perfectly normal. Brilliant. Just mark those points on either side of your pattern piece. You may just want to label this neckline notch. It just helps you to remember, doesn't it, when you've got lots of different alterations to your pattern pieces. Brilliant. Okay, there's one small little thing to do. Now, as we create the collar that goes around the neck, obviously we're going to be folding it in half to create a nice, neat finish, so that there's the right side showing on both sides. Now, the only other thing I want to do is just to create a little bit of shaping around the collar, and this is quite a marginal thing to do, but it will make an impact, especially if your fabric's a little bit thicker. So effectively we're going to add a little dart to the centre back and also at the shoulder seam as well, just to help the whole thing kind of sit and tuck in. We're just going to mark the fold line on this piece, and that is 2.5 centimetres all the way down the middle. Just dot that on so you've got that as a nice reference. And then just over here, we're going to mark a point that is 0.5 centimetres away from the centre back along that centre line, and then just draw a little dart. Now at this point where the shoulder seam is, find the centre point along our centre line, and then I just want you to mark a point 0.5 centimetre to either side of that along the centre line, and then just draw in a little diamond shape. Now what these little darts do is they effectively reduce the volume that we've got along the folded section so that it wants to sit nice and flat. It's kind of scrunched in, isn't it? That's effectively what we're trying to do. Brilliant. We've done all the alterations to our block now in order to create this pussy bow blouse. So let's now add our tracing paper and add our seam allowances. Okay, we'll start off at the top of the collar pattern piece, and we're just going to add a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way around the pattern piece. Add in your notch for your fold line. Add your notches for the base of the neckline, which is this one down here, and then draw in your dart. So we're going to draw the grain line for our collar at 45 degrees, and that's just simply so that it creates a nice amount of swish and sway as we wear it. It also sits nicely and against the collar pattern piece, giving it a bit of movement. Pussy bow blouse, blouse collar, cut 2. Great, let's move on to our back pattern piece. Draw a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance to your shoulder seam, and also your neckline needs the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance at this point so that the collar can be attached onto it. Our centre back is just going to be cut on the fold. Draw in the waistline, ignoring that dart, because we're having a nice loose fit around the waist so we can get this garment on over our over our head, and add a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance to your side seam. We're not adding a sleeve, so just draw in your arm side. Pussy bow blouse collar, back bodice, cut 1 on fold. Add a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance around the perimeter of the neckline. Add a 2 centimetre seam allowance to your centre front and also to that V shape that you've got going on at the neckline. Draw in your waist, ignoring the dart. Add a seam allowance to the side seam. Draw in your shoulders and draw in the bust dart. Draw in the arm side. Grain line is just going to follow the centre front. Pussy bow blouse collar, front bodice, cut 2. Brilliant. Once you've done all of that, just cut out your pattern pieces out tracing paper and also your calico, and don't forget to transfer all your line markings as well. And then we're going to sew it up together and see what it looks like. To start off with, we're just going to sew the darts on the back pattern piece and also the front. If you're not sure how to do that, just refer back to video 22. Once you've done the back darts, press them towards the side, and likewise with the front pattern pieces, where we've got the 2 darts, we're also going to press them towards the side. Okay, so on our front bodice, we've got this line coming up straight here, and then we went off to our V. Now, as I've cut it out and I've sewn the dart, that shape has actually been lost slightly and it's gone into a bit more of a curve. So it's hard to see where the junction of that point should be. So I'm just going to pop my pattern piece next to it. You can see how it's curved off as a result of that dart. And all I'm going to do is just mark a point where that V stops. And then we'll just do the same for the other pattern piece. Okay, so pop the right sides together for your 2 pattern pieces. And then just pin from that mark at the bottom of the V, pin it down to the waist. Lovely. We're just going to sew this now at a 2 centimetre seam allowance offset from the raw edge from this point down to the waist. As you sew at the top, reinforce your stitches a couple of times, as this point is going to take a little bit of tension. The next thing we're going to do is just press that seam open. Once you press the seam allowance open, tuck one of the raw edges under so that the seam allowance is now only 1 centimetre wide and the raw edge is tucked right in so that it's touching that seam that you've just sewn. And repeat for the other side. Excellent. We're now going to turn under the top of the V by folding it under 1 centimetre and then folding it over again. And you should note that the V then stops exactly where your stitch line stopped, at the top of that V. Just repeat that process for the other side of the V. Next, just take your pins and pin that in place. Flip the pattern piece over so that you've got the right side facing up. This is where you're going to actually want to sew it when we come down to sewing it. And just pop a few pins down the centre line just to hold those 2 seams in place while you sew. Lovely. So what we're going to do now is sew a line of top stitching offset from the folded edge at about 8 millimetres so that it's catching the seam allowance on the underside. We're going to sew all the way down one side and then all the way down the other. That's looking nice now, isn't it? So as you can see, we've caught the stitch line and we've caught the folded edge on that side, and on the front it's looking really nice and even, so beautiful. Next, place the back pattern piece over the front with the right sides together and pin those shoulders in place. Just sew those using your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Just press those seam allowances open. Okay, we're now going to move on to the actual collar section, and we're just going to sew this little dart in both collars. Next, with right sides together, we are going to pin the chevroned side together and just sew using a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Great, so with the collar, we've got our centre back here, got our shoulder seam there, and then we've got these 2 little notches at this point. We've got the corresponding notches on the other side as well. What I want us to do is to fold from the notches to the end. I just want to fold it in half, lengthways like this, and then just pin it in place. Because it's cut on the bias, it is a little bit stretchy, a little bit, it doesn't kind of want to sit particularly beautifully, does it? Okay, so right sides together, I'm going to fold the other side too. And pin it in place up to that notch. Lovely. So we're going to now sew using our standard seam allowance down the short side and just up to the notch. We'll do that for both sides. Okay, so we've done one side, now I'm just going to do the other side. Great, okay, so trim off the corners. And then just trim the seam allowance from the notch all the way down. Just trim it about half in length. Do the same for both sides. While you've still got the pattern piece with wrong sides facing out effectively, what I want us to do is actually just with one side of the bit in between the bits where we've sewn, so this is the centre back and the shoulder seams, I just want us to turn up the seam allowance on one side only by 1.5 centimetres, which is your standard seam allowance. Now it is a bit tricky as we go over the darts, but it's possible, so just use that fabric, make it do what you want it to do. Next, what we want to do is just turn this right side facing out. So shoving the tube, the open hole tube, into one side, and then we're just getting our stick and pushing the sewn short edge through, which then brings the whole thing out and turns it out right side facing out really easily. The wooden stick, the dowel, is just left inside there, so we can use that to turn out the corners slightly and then just bring it out when you're finished with it. And repeat for the other side. You're probably going to want to press those now to keep them all nice and smooth, so let's go and do that now. Next, we're going to attach our bow to our top, and we're going to do that with right sides together. So with the bit that is with the side that is unfolded, so we've got the folded edge on this side, we're going to start just to pin in place, lining up the raw edges and the shoulder seams to start off with. And then the next thing we want to do is to line up the notch effectively down here with the top of our neckline. Then just pin in place all the way around. Great, once you've pinned it in place, just sew all the way around using a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Fantastic. Then just press that seam allowance up towards the collar. What we're going to do next is turn the folded edge of the collar over so it just sits over the stitch line, but we actually want to pin it from the right side facing up. And the reason why we want to do it that way is because we're actually going to be stitching in the ditch all the way around. So you may find it helpful to baste this in place first, or you may just be comfortable just going for it. Perfect. So once you've pinned that all the way around, we're then going to sew all the way along right in the ditch. We're going to stitch in the ditch so that the stitch line is practically hidden. You may also find it helpful to use a stitch in the ditch foot, which looks a little bit like that. Okay, lovely. So we've got a line of stitches just stitching in the ditch there. You might want to press that up, and then on the inside we've made sure that we've captured that seam allowance there so it's all held tight. Now the final thing that we need to do is just put right sides together and just sew up the side seams. So pin those in place and then sew using your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. All right, that's looking really cute. Let's go and see what it's going to look like when it's on. You can already see how these little bits here are helping that collar just to sit in, can't you? It's already wanting to come in, which is absolutely beautiful. Ta-da! Oh my goodness, so cute. So well done on finishing sewing that amazing pussy bow blouse. Let's take a look at it now. So here we go, this is the finished version of the blouse. I really like this collar detail and how flexible it is. You can tie it up high or just leave it nice and low. And you can imagine with fabric that really drapes beautifully, like the tencel, the lawn, cotton or silk, it would just hang very sort of floppily, but with firmer fabric it's going to have a bit more structure to it. And fantastic. So that has been a lot of fun filming and making that cute little detail. Now that you've seen how to do that, I'm sure you're going to have that heightened awareness where you keep spotting that detail everywhere. It's a really great one. So thank you for joining me today. It's been loads of fun as always. I hope you've really enjoyed watching the film, and if you've got any comments, feel free to pop them below the video. We always love to hear from you. It's great that we're a part of this amazing maker community here at Minerva. So do let us know your thoughts, and if you're following the pattern drafting series and having some pattern drafting adventures yourself, please do create an account on our website where you can upload your photos and share with the community. We always love to see what you guys are up to at home.